Jake had been hauling freight for over 3 decades, but he'd never run into trouble like this. A late-night fuel stop turned into a deadly Travis rig surrounded by a gang of outlaw bikers, their engines growling like hungry wolves. They thought he was just another old trucker, easy prey. What they didn't know, Jake had been through worse, and he wasn't about to roll over for anyone. They thought he was an easy target. Big mistake. What would you have done in Jake's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more thrilling stories. Jake pulled his rig into the dusty gas station just off the highway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. It had been a long haul, and he needed to fuel up before hitting the road again. As he stepped out of his truck, the air smelled of gasoline, fried food, and trouble. Trouble was something Jake recognized instantly. A group of bikers lounged near the entrance, leaning against their motorcycles like a pack of wolves waiting for their next meal. Leather jackets, chains, heavy boots, the kind of guys who thrived on making weaker men nervous. But Jake wasn't weak. He'd seen real danger before. This was just a bunch of loudmouths with too much time on their hands. He kept his pace slow, measured, his eyes scanning every detail. 6 of them, maybe 7. Some laughed among themselves, others glared at him as he walked past. A bad sign. He knew the type. Guys who pick fights just to prove something. Jake reached for the fuel pump, but before he could start, he heard it. "Nice truck, old man." The voice was deep, mocking. Jake glanced over his shoulder. One of the bikers had stepped forward. A big guy, thick beard, arms covered in tattoos that told stories Jake didn't care to read. He took a long drag from his cigarette and flicked it onto the pavement. Jake exhaled slowly and ignored him, going back to filling up his tank. The biker smirked. "What, too good to talk to us?" Another one, younger, meaner looking, stepped closer. "You know, we don't like strangers rolling into our stop like they own the place." Jake kept his eyes on the fuel gauge. "Ain't looking for trouble." The big guy laughed. "That's so? See, me and my boys, we don't really care what you're looking for." He took another step forward, closing the gap between them. "Matter of fact, we were just saying how it'd be nice to take a little road tax from folks passing through." Jake clenched his jaw. He'd seen enough of these games in his time. Guys like this only respected one thing: strength. One of the bikers kicked at the back wheel of Jake's truck. "Damn, this rig looks like it's been through hell. Bet it ain't even worth much." The others chuckled. Jake set the pump back in place, turning just enough to face them. "You boys always this friendly, or is today special?" The big guy's smile faded. He took another step closer, standing toe-to-toe with Jake now. "You got a mouth on you, old-timer." Jake smiled. It was the kind of smile that wasn't friendly. The kind that said he'd been here before. "You got no idea." The biker's fingers twitched. Jake noticed. This was about to get interesting. The tension thickened like the desert heat. The bikers weren't just posturing anymore. They were circling now, slowly closing in, their smirks fading into something darker. Jake could feel it. This wasn't just a shakedown. They were looking for a fight. The big guy, clearly their leader, cracked his knuckles. "You're acting real cocky for a man standing alone." Jake didn't move, didn't flinch. He just met the biker's gaze with the cold, unshaken confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. "I ain't the one that should be worried." That did it. The younger biker, the one with the mean eyes, stepped forward and shoved Jake hard in the chest. Jake barely moved, his boots planted firm. The other bikers chuckled. Jake exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. "All right," he muttered. "That was your one." The young punk scoffed. "One what, old man?" Jake's jaw clenched. "Your one free shot?" The laughter stopped. A few of the bikers exchanged glances. They had expected fear, submission, maybe some begging. Instead, they got a man who stood like a mountain, unshaken, unmovable. The leader growled, stepping even closer. "Maybe you don't understand what's happening here." Jake tilted his head. "Oh, I understand just fine." The leader reached into his jacket. Jake didn't wait to see what he was pulling out. In a single smooth motion, he lunged forward, gripping the biker's wrist in a vice-like hold and twisting hard. The guy yelped, dropping a switchblade onto the pavement with a metallic clink. That's when everything snapped. The young one swung first a wild, untrained punch. Jake ducked effortlessly, grabbed his arm, and used the biker's own momentum to slam him face first into the side of the truck. Another came from behind, throwing a punch at Jake's ribs. He turned, caught it midair, and hammered his fist into the guy's gut. 2 bikers were down in less than 5 seconds. The rest froze, their confidence draining fast. Jake straightened, shaking out his knuckles. "Still feeling tough?" The leader staggered back, holding his wrist, his face twisted in rage, but now there was something else in his eyes. Doubt. Fear. And Jake wasn't done yet. Jake had given them every chance, every warning, but they didn't take it. The leader, still cradling his wrist from Jake's earlier move, growled through gritted teeth. "You think you're some kind of tough guy, huh?" Jake sighed, cracking his knuckles. "I think you don't listen too good." That was all it took. One of the bikers sewn with a jagged scar running down his cheek ripped a chain from his belt and swung it. The heavy metal links whistled through the air, aiming straight for Jake's head. But Jake was faster. He ducked low, letting the chain slice just over his shoulder, and then drove his fist into Scarface's ribs. The man gasped, stumbling back. Another biker lunged with a knife. Jake sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted hard, forcing the blade to drop. With a single fluid motion, he slammed his knee into the guy's stomach, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. The others hesitated now, eyes darting between each other. Their numbers were still in their favor, but something had changed. Jake wasn't some trucker they could intimidate. He was something else. The leader snarled, reaching into his vest for something, maybe a gun. Jake didn't let him finish. He took one powerful step forward, grabbed the man by his leather jacket, and slammed him up against the gas station pillar. The metal creaked under the impact. Jake leaned in close, his voice deadly calm. "You boys really don't know who you're messing with." The leader swallowed hard. For the first time since this started, Jake saw it in his eyes. Fear. And now, it was his turn to teach them a lesson. Jake could feel the shift in the air. The bikers had lost their bravado. What started as a cocky attempt to corner an old trucker had turned into a lesson they'd never forget. The leader, still pinned against the gas station pillar, tried to sneer, but there was no confidence left in him. Jake tightened his grip on the man's jacket, his voice low and dangerous. "You should have walked away when you had the chance." Jake turned slightly, dragging the leader with him, and threw him forward. The man stumbled, barely catching himself before he hit the ground. The other bikers didn't move. They had their weapons, their numbers, but none of them wanted to be the next guy Jake put down. Scarface, still clutching his ribs, growled, "You're dead, old man." Jake just raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Scarface reached for his knife again just as the sound of engines rumbled in the distance. More bikers? Number? Truckers. A convoy of rigs rolled into the gas station lot, their engines growling like an approaching storm. Doors swung open, and one by one, men and women stepped out, drivers from all walks of life. Some were grizzled veterans of the road, others younger, but every one of them looked like they'd been through their share of fights. The bikers' expressions shifted from aggression to uncertainty. A tall trucker with a gray beard and a steel gaze stepped forward. "These boys causing you trouble, Jake?" Jake dusted off his knuckles. "Not anymore." The leader's confidence crumbled. He looked around, realizing how outnumbered he now was. His gang wasn't the biggest presence anymore. It was Jake and his people. Scarface stepped back, shaking his head. "Come on, man, let's just go." The leader hesitated, but he wasn't stupid. He spat at the ground, then glared at Jake. "This ain't over." Jake smirked. "Oh, it is. You just don't know it yet." With no other choice, the bikers backed away, retreating to their bikes. But the damage was done. The gas station had security cameras, truckers had their phones out, and soon every highway from here to the next state over would know what happened. No outlaw gang could survive that kind of humiliation. As they rode off, one of the truckers chuckled. "Damn fools thought they could mess with a trucker at a gas station? That's our turf." Jake exhaled, rolling his shoulders. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only a quiet satisfaction. Another trucker clapped him on the back. "Drinks on us tonight, Jake." Jake shook his head with a smirk. "Appreciate it, but I've got miles to go." He climbed into his rig, the other truckers giving him nods of respect. As he pulled back onto the highway, he glanced in the mirror at the gas station, fading in the distance. Another town, another gang that learned the hard way. Jake just hoped the next group of punks would be smarter. But if they weren't, well, he'd be ready. Jake drove down the open highway, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the asphalt. The hum of the engine was steady, rhythmic, just like his heartbeat finally settling after the chaos at the gas station. Another close call, another lesson handed out. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, glancing in the side mirror. No sign of the bikers. They wouldn't be stupid enough to come back, not after the beating their pride had just taken. But that wasn't what was on his mind. This wasn't the first time a bunch of punks thought they could intimidate a trucker, and it wouldn't be the last. People like them always made the same mistake. They saw a man alone on the road and thought he was weak. They saw an old trucker and assumed he was just another easy mark. They didn't understand the kind of life this road demanded. Jake had seen things these boys wouldn't survive. He had been through the kind of storms, accidents, and breakdowns that would break lesser men. And he had earned every damn mile he put behind him. Being a trucker wasn't just about hauling cargo. It was about grit, endurance, knowing how to handle yourself when there was no one coming to help. That's why he had survived today. And that's why those bikers? They had already lost before they even started. Jake reached for the radio, turning the dial until an old country song crackled through the speakers. The familiar tune filled the cab, blending with the rumble of the road beneath his wheels. He thought about all the other truckers out there, the ones who'd hear about this story at some diner in the middle of nowhere. The ones who would nod knowingly because they had their own tales to tell. The road had a way of testing a man. Some broke under it. Others, like Jake, just kept rolling. He smirked to himself. If those bikers were smart, they'd rethink their life choices. If they were dumb, well, maybe they'd try this again with another trucker. And maybe next time they wouldn't be so lucky. He shifted gears, his rig picking up speed, the endless stretch of highway ahead welcoming him back like an old friend. Another day, another town, another lesson for anyone stupid enough to think they could push a trucker around. What do you think? Have you ever had to stand your ground when someone underestimated you? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories from the road.